Let's travel back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, on October 22, 1984, when the city was left baffled as 18-year-old Annette Craver disappeared without a trace. The police searched the area in an effort to find the truth, but they were unsuccessful, and the teenage married girl's whereabouts remained a sinister mystery. Despite the fact that her disappearance remains a mystery, the police were concerned that it might actually have been a horrifying homicide. It turned out that this situation was much more complicated than it seemed. In the long run for justice, a man was found at the center of it all, and for an incredible 54 years, his perverted viewpoint would prevail over the pursuit of justice before justice finally prevailed. What might have happened to Annette, a young, beautiful teenage girl? Why did it take so long to solve the mystery of this chilling case? Who was this maniac that took her away? Hello, and welcome back to Mystery Detective, where we explore dark and sinister stories around the world. Stay with us as we walk you through this 54 years mystery and two other eerie mysteries that are closely related to this terrifying case. Tulsa, a city in Oklahoma, is captivating with a distinctive fusion of tradition and modernity. This city, which is tucked away in the middle of America, offers a vibrant way of life that is enriched by its varied cultural scene. Tulsa is renowned for its exquisite architecture, well-preserved art installations, vibrant performing arts community, and succulent barbecue restaurants. The city is also well known for its long history of oil production and for being the birthplace of the famous Route 66. Tulsa has battled crime despite its accomplishments. The city's violent crime rate exceeded the national average in 2020, making it one of the most dangerous cities in the country. Further emphasizing the negative aspects of the city, Tulsa also saw the mysterious disappearance of Annette Craver. Annette Michelle Craver was born on December 7, 1965, in Houston, Texas, but little is known about her early life. In 1979, when her father tragically died in a car accident, things took a significant turn. The heartbreaking incident had a negative impact on Annette's emotional health. Annette's mother, Mary Rose, observed a noticeable shift in her daughter's behavior, noting that she became more reclusive and frequently turned to solitude for comfort. Annette was by herself a lot of the time. She was constantly creating art and writing poetry. She would also occasionally pick up a guitar. Mary was aware, deep down, that her cherished daughter had been experiencing great hardships as a result of her father's passing. A significant event took place on September 8, 1981, when Mary organized a yard sale in Houston to sell her late husband's possessions. 15-year-old Annette actively helped her mother sell off her father's possessions. Despite her lack of expression, it was clear that Annette had not yet recovered from the devastating loss of her father. Mary worried about Annette's isolation and loneliness, but she was unaware that Annette wasn't actually feeling lonely. Unknown to Mary, Annette had been involved with a charming man who had a sizable age difference. In addition to being older than Annette, the man was even older than Annette's mother. Mary's first encounter with Annette's friend, 40-year-old Felix Vale, occurred at the yard sale. Mary didn't suspect anything and never entertained the thought that there might be more going on. As Felix approached Annette to talk, Mary noticed the obvious age gap. Mary struggled with the burden of financial difficulties following the death of her husband. After finding it difficult to find employment in Houston, she considered moving away in search of work and better opportunities to give her daughter a better life. Mary overcame a number of obstacles and was rewarded for her perseverance when she received a job offer in Oklahoma. But there was still a lot to worry about. Annette, who had already missed 2 academic years, was about to receive her high school diploma. Mary was aware that her daughter's academic progress might be jeopardized by a sudden move to another state. When faced with this decision, Mary went with her plan of action. She asked a friend for help in taking care of Annette while she relocated to Oklahoma in search of employment. Although the plan seemed good at first, it soon started to fall apart for Mary. As time went on, a growing worry became apparent. The bond between Annette and Felix appeared to have grown stronger while she was away. As she watched the 40-year-old man become more involved in her daughter's life, Mary couldn't help but feel uneasy. This was a circumstance that greatly disturbed her. After Annette graduated from high school, Mary was able to buy a new home thanks to her diligent saving. She registered the house under both of their names, with the hope of reuniting their lives and living together once again. Mary's thoughts of a long-awaited reunion were dashed after she learned that Annette had left when she got back to Houston. Mary discovered that after Annette graduated high school, Felix immediately suggested a road trip to her. Captivated by his charm, she happily accepted his offer. Over the course of 1983, Mary did occasionally get letters from Annette, each coming from a different place. Then one day, a call from her daughter, who was at the time living in California, arrived. Hearing from Annette gave Mary a rush of happiness, but the conversation quickly became concerning. Annette, who was only 17 years old at the time, asked her mother for permission before she married Felix Vale. Annette seemed to have already made up her mind, despite Mary telling her daughter it would be a mistake to marry Felix, advising her to wait until she was at least 18 years old. Annette allegedly declared her love for Felix Vale and intended to wed him in Mexico. Mary struggled with a difficult decision, knowing that she might lose her daughter, who was very involved with Felix. She was aware that refusing a daughter she hadn't seen in a while could have its own effects. She consequently gave the marriage her approval with a heavy heart, believing her daughter to have good judgment, and not realizing Felix was a bad man. But the perfect married life Annette had pictured would soon start to fall apart. Annette opened up to her mother in letters written shortly after their wedding. She revealed that Felix had changed unsettlingly, becoming more and more domineering. She shockingly revealed that Felix had even forced her to have an unauthorized abortion after learning she was pregnant with his child. Mary begged Annette to come home right away, consumed with worry for her daughter's safety. Annette eventually mustered the strength to escape Felix's grip in 1984 and made her way back to her mother. However, when Mary finally caught a glimpse of her daughter, she couldn't help but notice that she had changed. Annette had lost her identity. She was constantly perplexed by everything. Mary believed that her daughter was simply overwhelmed by Felix's attempts to manipulate and control her life. Mary found comfort in being reunited with her daughter amidst the changes. But this joy was short-lived. They were unhappy not long after Annette returned. Felix began tormenting their home with relentless phone calls and his insistence on speaking to Annette. Mary was unmoved and maintained her position, determined to defend her daughter at all costs. However, things got worse in October 1984, when Felix was able to breach Mary's house's perimeter, boldly entering without permission and making his way up to Annette's room. The two spent some time talking privately in Annette's room. When they eventually came out to Mary, they would say something that would break her heart. Mary was sternly instructed to leave the house by them. Mary tried to patch things up with Annette, despite her heartbreak, but her efforts were in vain. Annette remained controlled under Felix's sway and was unresponsive to any opposing viewpoint. Mary gave up her share of the home as a result, packed her belongings, and moved to California with a heavy heart. The nightmare did not end there, though. When Annette turned 18 years old, she made a big decision by claiming the inheritance her late father had left for her. Surprisingly, she allegedly transferred all the money into Felix's account and gave him legal ownership to her home. Mary attempted to contact her daughter after learning of this worrying development, but for some reason she was unable to reach her. She then wasted no time and contacted Felix right away. Felix asserted that Annette had requested going to Mexico on her own and that he had put her on a bus. On October 22, 1984, Mary immediately called the police and reported her daughter missing. Following receipt of the missing person report, the Tulsa police moved quickly to speak with Felix Vale, in an effort to gather any information they could. Unfortunately, the police were also manipulated by Felix, just like Annette. Mary had a strong hunch that Felix was concealing the truth and had a significant role in Annette's disappearance. Despite her convictions, the police were persuaded by Felix's remarks and gave up looking for Annette Craver. Felix was successful in persuading the authorities that Annette had left alone, on her own volition. Mary was left feeling helpless and clinging to the steadfast hope that her daughter would one day return after being repeatedly ignored by law enforcement regarding her daughter's disappearance. She sat by the phone for years, hoping Annette would call to say hi on special occasions, like her birthday and Mother's Day, but sadly, nothing ever happened. By 1991, a startling 7 years had passed without a significant development in the search for Annette Craver. Mary wrote hundreds of letters in an effort to contact the police, but neither they nor the FBI were interested in getting back to her. Even Felix didn't respond to the letter she sent him. Mary had the sobering insight that depending on others would be fruitless. She made the decision to conduct an independent investigation due to her tenacity. Mary initially tried to learn more about Felix using the developing internet's resources, because she was convinced he held the key to Annette's disappearance. However, there wasn't a lot of online information available in the 1990s. Mary's unwavering diligence allowed her to track down a single but crucial lead, which was Sue Jordan, Felix's sister. Mary traveled halfway across the country to meet her, spurred on by hope and the potential for learning crucial information. Mary was informed by Sue Jordan that Felix had a wife who had drowned. With the help of this promising information, Mary was able to locate Mary Horton Vale's family in Louisiana in 1993. Mary Horton Vale was Felix's first wife. Her efforts paid off when she was able to track down Mary Horton's brother, Will Horton, who had only been 15 when his sister tragically drowned in the Calcasieu River. Will Horton described his sister with a warm heart during Mary's encounter with him. He said, "My sister was so very special, so thoughtful and kind." He spoke of her with fondness. Felix Vale, his brother-in-law, was not accorded the same sentiment though. Will Horton revealed that his family had a clear grudge against Felix. Mary Elizabeth Horton Vale's ancestry can be found in Louisiana, where she was born on February 16, 1940. She assumed the position of editor for the school newspaper. She was also named the Eunice High School Homecoming Queen. When she was attending McNeese State College in 1960, to further her education, her path crossed with Felix's. Amazingly, the two exchanged wedding vows just 6 months after they first met. In 1961, their union produced a child. Bill Vale, their son, was welcomed into the world by Mary. Felix, however, acted otherwise. With the birth of their child, Felix's attitude changed noticeably. He began to treat his first wife with a controlling attitude, much like he did with Annette later. He even threatened her, telling her what would happen if she got pregnant again. Mary Elizabeth Horton Vale became pregnant once more the following year, despite Felix's warning. Felix was enraged by the news, driving her to seek safety from his fury. She and her son Bill fled to her mother's house out of fear of his wrath. Mary Horton considered divorcing Felix, but her mother advised her to go back and try to make amends with him. Mary's life tragically ended before they could settle anything. On October 28, 1962, Mary Horton and Felix Vale went fishing along the Calcasieu River. In an unfortunate turn of events, Mary drowned to death. Felix described what happened when he was questioned by the police. According to him, Mary allegedly drowned after she unintentionally fell off the boat. The Horton family, however, remained dubious of this account and found it difficult to believe. Felix quickly rose as a top suspect in the investigation, as a result of the murky circumstances surrounding Mary's drowning. She was found dead in a place that was unsuitable for fishing. After being found 2 days later, her body underwent an autopsy, which turned up red flags. Mary had bruises on her neck, right calf, and left leg, which suggested that she may have fought before being forced into the water. Authorities discovered a scarf that had been wrapped around her neck and put in her mouth, suggesting traumatic asphyxia, a type of suffocation. This discovery provided additional damning evidence. The detectives were confident Felix was the murderer in light of the mounting evidence, but the coroner had a completely different take. He thought the evidence was insufficient to convict Felix. Felix also vehemently denied being guilty. He was released in January 1963 after a Colchester parish grand jury declined to indict him. At the time, Mary Horton's family was devastated and felt cheated by Felix's release. Mary Rose, Annette's mother, was more enraged by what she had heard as Will Horton broke down, relaying this tragic information. Will described how the loss of his sister devastated their mother and left a void in his heart that would never be filled. At that point, Mary Rose's pursuit of justice included a steadfast search for justice on behalf of Will's sister, Mary Horton, in addition to her daughter. Though, before the two women could receive justice and the police could be fully involved, Mary Rose understood the need for more concrete evidence than just statements. Thankfully, she was no longer fighting for justice by herself. Will Horton tells Mary that since 1975, he has been getting calls from people asking about a girl who vanished in Sulphur, Louisiana in 1973. The fact that the girl in question was Sharon Hensley, Felix's ex-girlfriend after Mary Horton, added to the unsettling nature of the situation. Sharon Hensley's mother called for years to inquire as to whether Sharon had been seen. Mary Rose began a new journey in her search for knowledge. She soon understood that her daughter was not Felix's only victim. In 1994, she made her way to Bismarck, North Dakota, to meet with Sharon Hensley's brother Brian. Brian characterized his sister as independent. In the summer of 1970, Sharon Hensley, who was born on December 20, 1948, left her home in Bismarck, North Dakota. She aimed to welcome a new beginning in her life as she joined other free-spirited people who are forging their journey in the wake of the renowned Summer of Love. Sharon Hensley's ultimate destination was San Francisco. She was able to accomplish her objective, but the reality that met her was a far cry from the idyllic life she had imagined in her North Dakota sanctuary. Her path instead took her to Felix Vale. Felix at that time adopted an unconventional lifestyle and embraced a nomadic existence after the death of his first wife. During this stage, he even assumed the persona of a traveling preacher and founded his own personal cult group called the Holy Order of Mans. During this time, Sharon Hensley, then aged 21, met Felix. In 1972, 2 years after leaving, Sharon visited her parents' house in Bismarck with her new boyfriend, Felix Vale. But their daughter had undergone a change. The once vivacious North Dakotan girl who loved to dance and hang out with her friends now seemed distant. Her parents were worried that her independence was being supplanted by the influence of her new boyfriend. Her parents were uncomfortable after the meeting, but Sharon, who was an adult, decided to leave with Felix. She had the freedom to choose her own course of action. Nevertheless, her parents' concerns grew more serious. They believed Felix was exposing their daughter to a dangerous lifestyle, one characterized by drug use and irresponsible conduct. But not even they could have predicted what lay in store for the future. In a short period of time, Sharon joined Felix's cult group and interacted with them. Her involvement, though, came at the same time as the dramatic change in their relationship. At the time, Felix's drug use increased and his behavior changed, becoming more violent and domineering. During those times, Sharon's family thought she was with him out of fear. She had no idea how to escape the predicament. Along with Felix, Sharon was about to travel to South America. But before beginning this journey, she called her mother one last time to say goodbye. Her mother sensed something was wrong, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Her maternal instincts were spot on, because after that final communication, Sharon stopped calling or writing. She disappeared with no trace. In a letter to Sharon's family in 1973, Felix claimed that he had last seen Sharon in Key West. His story was that she had left him and gone sailing around the world with an Australian couple. The Hensley family, however, had skepticism about everything Felix said, as was a common theme in all of these cases. In February 1973, Sharon's family reported her missing, but regrettably, the police did nothing for a full year. A dated newspaper report filled the gap, even though there were immediate investigations or initial police support. The story from the old newspaper caught Brian Hensley's attention. The news report from 1970 mentioned Sharon and Felix's arrest. According to the report, a young boy of about 8 years old showed up at the police station and asked for help to go back home. Bill Vale, the son of Mary Horton and Felix Vale, was revealed to be the child. Bill, an 8-year-old boy, went to the police station without shoes or socks and complained that his father was forcing him to smoke marijuana and that he wanted to return home. The Horton family was unaware that Felix had taken Bill with him when he left for California, following Mary Horton's passing. Bill was compelled to follow his troubled father wherever he went from that point on. Additionally, the police discovered that Bill had a history of violence. The police also discovered that Bill had experienced abuse during this time, before escaping and making his way to the police station. Felix and Sharon were detained for endangering a child. However, it is unknown how the two managed to escape the police custody. When Mary Rose heard about all of these things from Sharon's brother, she made the decision to meet Bill Vale. She thought Bill might be a source of vital information because he had valuable knowledge about where Felix was. With this goal in mind, Mary set out for Kansas to meet with Bill and his family. Mary Rose said Bill was very honest. He treated her with a lot of kindness and sympathy. Mary observed that despite being a good man, he was terrified of his father. Bill was initially apprehensive to share much information for fear that doing so might unintentionally bring Felix closer to his own wife and kids. But his desire to help Mary and obtain justice for his mother won. Bill made the decision to seize this opportunity after realizing its importance. He gathered the courage to divulge the dark secrets that might support Mary's claims. Bill described an important event that happened in 1970, just before he fled and arrived at the police station. He had unintentionally overheard his father, Felix, and Sharon talking to each other. Bill claimed that Felix admitted to Sharon that he had killed Mary Horton, his mother. Bill sought refuge with his grandparents after Sharon and Felix were detained in 1970, which resulted in a significant change in his life. Despite this alteration, he continued to be afraid of his father, especially since he was required to testify against him in court throughout the trials. This fear of his father's return increased his anxiety, and tragically, Felix did return in 1975. Felix arrived at Bill's grandparents' house and asked to see his son. The fact that Sharon was no longer with Felix added to Bill's fear, which was already strong. When Bill inquired about Sharon, Felix responded that Sharon would never bother anyone again. Bill, who was only 13 years old, understood what he meant, but he had no way to put that knowledge to use. At the time, he was unable to speak to anyone about his father's sinister behavior. Bill struggled with the worry that if he shared these revelations, Felix might hurt his family. His desire for justice, however, was stronger. Sadly, Bill's battle with cancer claimed his life in 2009, preventing him from seeing his mother's justice served. Bill, however, made sure to meticulously document his account of Felix's confession before he passed away. He asked the local preacher to write down his story so that the truth would be preserved for future generations. After a while, Mary Rose felt she had something important enough to ask the FBI to reopen the case. Although she was aware that there was no physical proof, she clung to the belief that the testimony of the Hortons, Sharon's brother, Felix's son, Bill, and herself could possibly give her the evidence she needed to pursue justice for her daughter. Mary had the opportunity to speak with a special FBI agent who dealt with cold cases and serial killers. He accepted Mary's account and determined Felix was a serial killer. Tragically, the cold case department took the brunt of the budget cuts, and the agent who had demonstrated support for Mary's cause was let go. Due to this unfortunate turn of events, Mary's quest for justice had no way to be furthered. She awoke to find herself exactly where she had started. Mary felt guilty for having inspired all the families to pursue justice. The families who trusted her, though, knew she wouldn't give up. Even though the conversation fizzled, Mary kept looking for someone to assess their situation. She simply felt a strong desire to put Felix behind bars. Over the course of nearly 30 years, Mary had been gradually worn down as a result of her resolve to fight for justice. While listening to the radio in June 2011, Mary heard about a detective who had solved 8 murder cases involving the infamous burning Mississippi murders, which were carried out by the Ku Klux Klan. Before he cracked them, these cases had remained unsolved for 50 years. The knowledge of this gave Mary the additional push she required. Mary immediately set out on a quest to find the investigator's contact information. Fortunately, she was able to find his phone number. Jerry Mitchell, a resident of Mississippi, was this person. Mary informed Jerry Mitchell about the cases and soon learned that Felix Vale had moved to Mississippi. As a result of this realization, Mary was faced with a decision she had to make. Mary Rose and Jerry Mitchell traveled through Mississippi in 2011 in order to reach the crucial spot where the criminal was. They arrived at a remote and desolate trailer park. Jerry wondered if Felix was watching them as they highlighted from their vehicle, but Mary didn't seem to care. She merely wished to put an end to Felix Vale's chapter. They noticed a broken window as they neared the trailer house. Mary crept through the window to enter the room in search of the truth without thinking twice about the danger. Jerry couldn't believe his eyes when she started throwing out machetes a short while later. Mary Rose and Jerry saw someone rushing in their direction as they looked around the house. But it wasn't Felix Vale. Rather, it was K.A. Faulkner, his sister, who appeared to be upset at their sudden intrusion. However, when Kay found out why Mary and Jerry were there, her initial anger at their unforeseen presence quickly subsided. When K.E. Faulkner was spoken to, she admitted that she thought her brother had murdered those women. Only one day into the investigation, Jerry Mitchell recognized the quick progress made and seized the opportunity. He started by speaking right away with Mary Rose, the Hensleys, and the Hortons. As a result of these testimonies from the victim's family, in 2015, the book titled Gone was published. This book painstakingly documented the family's experiences. It received numerous awards and a great deal of immediate acclaim. The FBI became aware of this book, and after carefully considering all the relevant information, they decided to reopen the investigation. Mary, who had struggled for a long time, at last felt true happiness. Mary Horton's case was given priority by the FBI after a careful review of all the information that was available, primarily because her death had been officially declared, unlike that of Sharon and Annette, whose bodies had never been found. The problem was that this case had been going on for more than 50 years, which had led to reports and data being lost over time. The FBI persisted in their search for a district attorney who would be willing to take on this challenging old case, and they eventually found the right candidate, Hugh Holland. After reviewing the case, Hugh Holland didn't waste any time in sending out a squad to raid Felix's house. Authorities discovered Felix Vale's nearly 2,500-page journal. They learned from reading the journals that Felix made a conscious effort to dominate every woman in his life, frequently using physical force. Felix wrote about how he even enjoyed drinking raw blood in the journals. But there was nothing pertaining to the killings. Since Mary Horton drowned in the Caucasia River in 1962, Holland and his team decided to find someone who might have any information regarding the incident. Surprisingly, they discovered a man named Ike Abshire, who was 90 years old. Felix Vale and Ike Abshire shared a room when Felix Vale lived in Lake Charles. Ironically, Ike's father had a lot of boats and was a member of the search team that the sheriff's office hired to look for Mary Horton's body. Ike was on board in his father's boat when Mary's body was found. As they were talking during their meeting, Ike Abshire, who was in a wheelchair, handed Hugh Holland an envelope with the word "keep" written on it. When Holland opened the envelope, he took 2 pictures out, and they turned out to be pictures of Mary Horton's body on the day it was discovered, showing severe bruising and wounds. When Holland finally came to the realization, he grabbed the photos and started his examination. Holland was working on the case in his office when a pathologist happened to walk by. "Who murdered her?" the pathologist said as he bowed down to look at the pictures. That was sufficient evidence and confirmation for Holland to declare Mary Horton's case to be a homicide. Now armed with sufficient proof and strong evidence, Holland quickly filed charges against 76-year-old Felix Vale for the murder of his first wife, Mary Horton. In a fitting turn of events, Louisiana, the very location where the case had started, became the location where it finally came to an end. 2014 served as the year of judgment when Felix Vale was captured and taken into custody. The disappearances of Sharon and Annette were also brought up during the trial. After all, Felix Vale was the last person to see them both. Holland asked Ike Abshire to testify because he understood how important his testimony was to the case, and that it will be the most important piece of evidence used throughout the entire trial. Ike Abshire died at his home on May 17, 2014, from old age, nearly 3 months after giving his testimony. However, during the court proceedings, his testimony proved to be the deciding factor that all doubts were dispelled. The jury only needed about 10 minutes to reach a conclusion. Felix Vale received a life sentence after being found guilty. When Felix was found guilty, Mary Rose, Brian Hensley, and Will Horton, who were among the audience, breathed a sigh of relief. Mary and Brian were relieved that Felix was held accountable for his actions, finally receiving the punishment he deserved, even though his involvement in Annette's and Sharon's disappearance could not be proved. Brian Hensley was finally able to hold a memorial for his sister after the verdict. It makes no difference to the victim's family whether Felix was found guilty of killing just Mary Horton or all 3 women. What matters is that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. After Felix was taken into custody, justice was served, and Mary Rose's tenacious pursuit was rewarded. However, the emotional scar on her heart never fully healed, serving as a constant reminder of the agonizing pain she had experienced. Writing letters as if they were meant for Annette to read helped Mary cope with her lingering guilt over abandoning her daughter because of work, and she did so in the hopes that one day she would be able to move past it and eventually forgive herself. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts with us in the comments.
While on a trip to Australia with her best friend, a 17-year-old girl suddenly vanished without a trace. The police and her family were left wondering what had happened to her for 18 years, despite the thorough search for her and the numerous witnesses that came forward. One shocking fact emerged when this terrible mystery was finally unraveled. The police had all the information they needed to wrap up the investigation quickly, but their carelessness and lack of professionalism caused it to take almost 2 decades. In today's video, I will narrate the story of what happened to Haley Dodd. Haley Dodd was born in the United Kingdom on the 30th of November 1981 to Raymond and Margaret Dodd. She grew up in a fairly large, close-knit family with 5 other siblings. When Haley was younger, in the year 1990, she and her whole family immigrated to Australia, settling in the village of Mandorah. Throughout her elementary, middle, and high school, Haley Dodd was an excellent student. She participated in sports and had intentions to further her studies. She wanted to become either a veterinarian or a school teacher. However, before making a final choice for a career, Haley wanted to go on an adventure, exploring the whole of Australia. For this reason, at the age of 17, when she obtained her high school diploma, she and her best friend Lisa left on a trip to Western Australia. Their goal was to spend a few months away from home, rather than just driving through nearby towns and tourist hotspots. The two friends planned to look for temporary jobs while traveling in order to pay for their living expenses, which included food and transportation. They planned to enjoy their vacation by hitchhiking within cities in Australia, which at the time didn't seem like a risky idea. 1 out of 100 young women were being killed while hitchhiking at the time, but given how many people did so safely, there was no widespread fear sparked by these crimes. Haley Dodd was certain that even with a friend by her side, her parents would forbid her from traveling by hitchhiking. She then assured them that she would be taking the bus instead. In July 1999, Haley and Lisa traveled to a place called Dongara. They already had a part-time job where they would work as day laborers on a nearby farm there. They were residing at a camping ground where they got a space to sleep for the night in exchange for a small fee. These camping grounds are very popular in Australia, primarily due to their low prices. A few days before starting work, Haley made the decision to use the rest of her free time to travel to a family friend's farm near Moora. She had once been there and wanted to visit them after a long time. She planned to hitchhike to the farm, but Lisa was reluctant to let her leave alone. Haley insisted that she need not worry and would return soon. As a parting gift, Lisa gave Haley herself a defense folding knife and some cash so she could call her from the phone booth. On the 29th of July, at around 8 a.m., Haley left the camping site and headed towards the farm. Meanwhile, at the farm, family friends were expecting and waiting for her, but she never showed up. Being concerned, they decided to inform her mother. Margaret Dodd immediately called the police out of concern that something might have happened to her daughter. She first dialed the 000 emergency number and explained the situation at hand. After hearing her story, the operator concluded that there was nothing urgent about the situation. She, however, told Margaret to go file a missing person report at the nearby police station, which she did. Going through the timeline of events of that day, the detectives started looking for Haley. They started off by going to the campsite where Lisa was staying. After being told why they were there, Lisa was shocked to learn that Haley never made it to the farm. She was able to provide the police with a detailed description of each outfit Haley wore on that particular day, as well as a sketch of the earring Haley was wearing. She had purchased these earrings a few days prior to her disappearance. She was drawn to the piece of jewelry when she and Lisa went shopping to treat themselves to some inexpensive items. Haley had no idea that those earrings would hold the key to unlocking the terrible mystery of her disappearance at the time. Investigators released details regarding the missing teenager, including her description. Despite being almost 18-year-old, Haley appeared much younger. She stood at 152 centimeters tall and weighed a little over 40 pounds. As the investigation progresses, the first witness was easily found by the police. It happened to be the truck driver who had given her a ride that day. According to the man, Haley had reportedly knocked on his truck's window at a gas station and requested a ride to a place called Moora, where the farm was. Although the trucker was en route to another farm, he agreed to give her a ride for the majority of the distance. She was later dropped off by the man above 50 kilometers from Moora, close to the town of Ushangira. He further reported that Haley had been in a cheerfully good spirits, talking about her trip the entire way. He had also given her $15 to get something to eat after she said she was running low on cash. In case she needed a ride back, he also left her his phone number. Since he traveled that road almost all the time, he wouldn't have minded giving her another ride. Detectives later received a number of calls from witnesses who claimed to have seen Haley in the vicinity. The police eventually came to the conclusion that Haley had been walking on foot along the northwest road towards Mora, based on the witnesses' testimony. Evidently, she was unable to hitch a ride from a driver at the gas station. As a result of that, she then made the decision to walk alongside the road in an effort to hitch a ride. Another witness claimed that he gave Haley a ride to the Winjardi Road turnoff before she continued walking towards her destination. The following witness was a female driver who was passing by. She caught sight of Haley just as she was getting out of another car and walking towards Mora. More than 10 witnesses in total called the police. Detectives came to the conclusion that Haley was last seen at around 11:45 a.m. on the Northwest Road, about 50 kilometers from Mora. However, there was another witness who, despite not having seen Haley, nonetheless told the police something unsettling. According to the man, his engine was overheating, so he stopped on the side of the Northwest Road. While fixing up his car, he briefly heard a dog barking before a female piercing scream. Since it might have been far away, he was unable to see the source of the noise. The road traveled through a barren, flat area with little background noise. Giving all of this information, the police's prognosis was disappointing from the onset. Eddie Rowe, the lead detective, decided that they should search for the body rather than think about the possibility that Haley might still be alive. However, management forbade him from doing so. Haley Dodd's case was left at the status of the missing person case. A murder investigation would have given the police more options than a missing person investigation, but they lacked any leads that could have helped them find Haley, so they started looking for potential kidnappers right away. They were able to locate several local suspects in a short period of time, but the police eventually concentrated on 3 men. One of them was a teacher at a nearby school, another worked there as a part-time gardener, and the third lived close to where Haley had disappeared. Each of them offered an alibi and pleaded not guilty when questioned. Although the police were unable to find any evidence to the contrary, they were unable to conclude with certainty that they were innocent. However, things quickly changed drastically. A neighbor of one of the suspects went to the police. He revealed to them that on the day Haley Dodd went missing, Francis Work, a 43-year-old school gardener, had taken his car to go shopping in Mora. Around 1 p.m. later that day, Francis came back to his house, and he noticed that inside the car had suffered damage. The dashboard had signs of an impact, and the turn signal knob was broken as well. The neighbor was unable to ask him what had happened to the car because when Francis Work arrived home, he threw his shopping bags in the kitchen before mounting his motorcycle and leaving again. The police decided to re-interview Francis because they thought this story was strange. Francis, however, claimed that he was many miles away from the alleged location of Haley's abduction. He claimed that after getting home, he immediately rode his motorcycle to a party in the city of Perth. He said he wasn't able to make it down there because he went over the speed limit on the way there, which resulted in a serious accident that made him go to the hospital. With the information at their disposal, the detectives were able to ask the obvious question: where was he going in such a hurry? Investigators decided to request a search warrant for his home after deciding that his own testimony was extremely strange. The police searched his home, but were unable to uncover any possible evidence. Forensics also examined the car. They searched the car and took the seat's cover off in order to examine them properly in the lab. However, all these resulted in nothing, and Francis Work was let off the hook. Not long after that, he moved to Queensland on the other side of the country, leaving the detectives without any leads while the case was left hanging on the shelf. Detectives made attempts to move the case forward by locating fresh witnesses and evidence, but all efforts were futile. After 8 long years, in 2007, Francis Work returned to the police radar. At that time, he was residing in a remote area of a small town. Next to his door lived an elderly couple who were relaxing one morning on their porch when they suddenly became horrified to see a young woman running in their direction completely naked and covered in blood. When she requested for help, the couple immediately called the police. The victim claimed that the previous evening she had attempted to get a ride. A man pulled up in front of her and offered to take her to wherever she was going. During the journey, the man then informed her that he had to go to one location in order to fill up his car with gas. They later pulled up to a house in the middle of nowhere where he called her inside and offered her some tea, which sadly she didn't deny. He attacked her shortly after that, and after a brief struggle, succeeded in taming and tying her up. The victim endured horrific violence and torture for the next few hours. Additionally, her attacker stole one of her earrings by ripping it off. This man was Francis Work, as you may have guessed. In the morning, the woman realized she could run once the rope was off her hands and her legs were free. She immediately started trying hard to loose the rope. After she succeeded, she watched out for Francis Work, waiting for him to get as far away as possible before dashing out through the back door. One smart move to note in the midst of this chaos was that the woman took off her necklace and threw it under the bed before leaving. She decided to leave some personal items in Francis's home out of concern that the police might not find any evidence to support her claim when she eventually reports him. And guess what? That single act of hers actually worked. After searching Francis' home, the police discovered the identical necklace and arrested him right away. After the trial, he quickly came to the conclusion that he could not get away with what he had done and made the decision to come clean. He then received a 12-year prison term. Although Francis' arrest was reported to the Western Australian police, who handled the Haley Dodds case, they showed no sign of interest whatsoever. The 8-year-old cold case, which so closely resembled the facts of Francis Work's crime, was not revived by the police. The detectives only agreed to reopen the case at Haley's mother's insistence. However, they quickly came to the conclusion again that Francis was still innocent in the Haley Dodds case, and that there was nothing they could do to change that. The police rebuffed Haley's family's repeated requests for a thorough investigation, saying that they had already done everything within their power. Haley's relatives spent tens of thousands of dollars on private investigators in a futile attempt to wait for law enforcement assistance. It was 6 long years before the case changed course. It was discovered in 2013 that the police had simply forgotten about the evidence, which ultimately proved to be the key to cracking the case. Tracy Horan, a medical examiner, submitted a request to reopen the Haley Dodds case. The reason was that the exact same car seat covers that had been taken from Francis' neighbor's vehicle in 1999 had been discovered in the evidence storage. Unexpectedly, it happened that for 14 years, no blood, DNA, or other forms of evidence had ever been tested on the seat covers. When the forensics went through the covers more thoroughly this time, they discovered a woman's earring that had become tangled in the material. Detectives went back to the drawings Lisa drew for the police shortly after her friend vanished. They came across the drawing of the earrings Haley was wearing that day and were shocked to see that it was the same earring found in the covers of the car's seat. Experts also found a human hair that had been removed from the car's mats. DNA sample was taken from the hair, and it matched Haley Dodds' mother's DNA. That implied that the hair was almost certainly Haley's. However, the likelihood was not 100%, making it very challenging to bring charges against Francis as soon as possible. As soon as the information reached the media, the police came under heavy fire. This evidence was right under the investigators' noses for 14 years, but during that time, they never remembered it. Naturally, such a discovery altered the course of the investigation, and the detectives traveled to another region of the country to question Francis once more. Francis Work was still serving a jail term at the time for assaulting a woman in 2007. He told the detectives the same story that he had told them 14 years earlier. He denied being involved in the murder and insisted that he was out shopping in Mora when Haley Dodd was kidnapped. The nearly 4-hour-long interrogation produced no results, so the police were forced to get the case ready for trial. He wasn't officially charged with Haley's murder until 2015, at which point he was deported to Western Australia. The trial started in late 2017. All of the evidence presented, according to Francis' defense, was circumstantial. His defense claimed that the earrings Haley Dodd purchased were both inexpensive and popular. Therefore, another woman might have left it in the car. Although not an exact match, the hair in the car showed a 100% match to Haley's DNA, though it would have been extremely unlikely to make a mistake here. That was sufficient for the attorneys, but the judge didn't find any of these arguments convincing. If Francis' crime from 2007 hadn't occurred, perhaps he would have still had a chance to escape punishment. However, he did more than just abducting the hitchhiking woman. He also stole her earring. The prosecution's theory that the man was hoarding the victim's earrings as trophies ultimately raised more questions about him. As a result, the judge sentenced him to 21 years in prison after finding him guilty of kidnapping and killing Haley Dodd. All of these occurred while his prior sentence was still being processed. Francis Work was sentenced at age 62, but the story did not end there. The jury was of the opinion that Francis abducted, killed, and then hid Haley's body, which was never discovered. Francis also refused to admit to his crimes. In 2018, Haley's mother worked to pass a new law that states murderers are not eligible for parole if they refuse to reveal the location of their victim's body. Haley's mother repeatedly asked the killer to reveal where he hid her daughter's body, but he refused. 2020 saw the occurrence of another notable occasion. Francis's appeal to have his sentence overturned was accepted by the court, and a new hearing was scheduled. His attorneys continued to argue that he would not have had time to abduct Haley Dodd between his trip to Mora and his return home. However, the court stated that the time span gave him well enough chance to do so, especially given the haste with which he arrived home and immediately left for Perth on his motorcycle. Even though the hair and the earring were still considered to be two of the most important pieces of evidence against him, Francis was still successful in having his sentence reduced. The court reduced his sentence from 21 years to 18 years after finding him guilty of involuntary manslaughter. But because of a law that was passed in 2018, he would still be unable to leave prison if he refused to say where he hid Haley Dodd's body. The detectives continue to be busy because of another aspect of the entire case. They are confident that Francis has victimized numerous additional women, and that none of them have been able to escape his wicked ways. This psychotic man may have been offering pretentious rides to young women on the streets for years. Only he knows what happened to them. The disappearance of a woman in late 2005 was one of the most likely comparable cases. She had hitchhiked to another city and had vanished without a trace. Because Francis knew the victim personally, the detective in charge of the case is certain that he abducted her, but there is currently no evidence to pin him to the crime. It might turn up again in the police's evidence room a few years down the road, but that wouldn't matter to the criminal. Francis would have been charged for the murder of Haley Dodd in 1999 if the police had conducted a more thorough inspection of the car. We currently have no way of knowing how many lives he destroyed in the years that followed, but sooner or later, the mystery may be unraveled. This entire story has another unsettling aspect. Do you recall that the police named 3 main suspects, including Francis, during the preliminary stages of the investigation? 5 months after Haley Dodd vanished, one of the suspects killed his wife. The second, who worked as a teacher, ended up being among the worst child predators in Australian history. Unfortunately, the police were powerless to stop them at the time of Haley's murder before they could harm someone else. Here ends today's crime story. Don't forget to support the channel by giving this video a like and leaving a comment of what you think about the case. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.